Hey guys, I'm Shanique and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I make videos on personal development and personal growth. And, sometimes that's in the form of conversations with other people. Other times it's in the form of book reviews like today. And sometimes it's just me by myself. But either way, come on the ride. I'm happy to have you here. If you're not new around here, welcome back. I appreciate the fact that you have found value in my content and, share with somebody so that they can join the community and, get all the things. Okay. Now that the formality is out of the way, I'm going to give you what you're here for. Okay. The review of this book, Will by Will Smith. Wow. Like, let me tell you, this book was well done, did not disappoint. Like, all of the emotions that were required to write this book and to put out a really good piece of content that can impact the lives of others, it did its job. I remember watching the first interview with Will that he did with Oprah right as the book came out. He talked about how much it required him to really go deep, dig deep. Oprah called this book the best book that she has ever read. The best book that she has ever read. And she wasn't exaggerating. Like, there's so many points in the book that I laughed, that I cried, that I just read things over and over, highlighted whole sections of the book, because more than anything, the book for me acted as a pivot point for me to review aspects of my own life, stories of my own life that may be similar in context to the stories that Will shared. And I think that's one of the most important aspects, right? Sometimes you can read a book and you can feel like, okay, the book is over there and I'm over here. But Will was able to unite, bring those two concepts so close so that you are experiencing his journey, but at the same time, you can actually see the correlations in your own life. And that's a very difficult thing to do as a writer, but as a reader, it's a phenomenal experience. If you haven't read the book before, there'll definitely be some spoilers in this video. After all, it's a review. If you have, join in on the conversation. Let me know if you could relate to the points that I could relate to. And I'm sure I'll miss some of them. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything that I share, of course, respectfully. But I'm always up for a good conversation. And, if you're still on the fence, hopefully by the end of this video, I would have convinced you enough to go and read the book, because certain things I just can't explain, right? You just gonna have to read the book for yourself. Like on Audible, it's 7 hours. We spend that time on Instagram every day. You can read a book or listen to the book or something. It's definitely worth it. Will Smith partnered with Mark Manson for the creation of this book. If you don't know who Mark is, he is the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving Up. Insert expletive here. And the book, everything is, insert this expletive here. I follow him on Instagram. I'm obsessed. But he has a unique way of writing, so much so that he's able to kind of dissect really, really complex topics, issues into simple, digestible stuff, right? That you can just say, you can read it and you can just be like, yeah, I get it. I can see myself there. And so you see some of that in terms of the structure of the book, but it's definitely, Will's voice and humor, of course, that comes through, and you're like, Yeah, that book here, it's shot. All right, so in my review, I kind of I try my best. Like all of the book I want to talk about. Let me start there. I want to talk about all of the book. I want to go page by page, ideally, and read each page for you, and then dissect it. That's what I really want to do. But for the sake of time and to leave some of it, some of it for you to go and discover for yourself. I tried to consolidate my points into themes as I saw them going through the book. So I'll try my best to outline, and I have notes. So if you see me looking down, I'm looking on my notes. Yeah, it's that kind of book. You have notes in the book and notes on paper because like I'm journaling and highlighting at the same time. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. All right, let's start with Will and his parents. Will's dad was very, very, very instrumental in how he was raised. Ex-military, so and a black man, like born in that time. I don't even remember what time, 50s, something like that. That speaks for itself in terms of what was required to survive in that time. And even black parents of today, like my mom, your mom, probably, if you are an African American or a black person or a person of color, parents ruled with fear. That was the way in which they offered up love, because they felt like, okay, if I can, instill that, then I can equip you to be able to go out there and do great things with your life. That's very much unlike what parenting is like today. Like as a millennial parent, I try not to operate from that space, but I do understand, it's important in terms of bringing points across, because you only get one life, right? Some things you don't get a do-over on, and some things have dire consequences. So fear has its place, but I definitely think that children of parents from that time were raised in such a way that a fear was weaponized and religion was weaponized, right? And Tabitha Brown talked about it in her book, but I think that religion in Will's case from his grandma was different. Like he saw her as light and love and all good things, like a true demonstration of who a Christian needed to be. And so, that was his insight into Christianity, spirituality. And even though like he didn't know what that meant at the time, like kids can identify those stuff. They're smart, right? They know. And we do that all the time. We see something in our mind and we just lock it away. We haven't yet processed it, but we know that's a feeling that we want to experience, or we know that's a place that we want to go. So, that's his experience with his grandma. And then with his mom, she worked with the Philadelphia Board of Education. So very elegant lady, very, pristine in her presentation. She's not using like slangs or broken English. She is speaking proper, okay? And she expects, education to be a top priority for any one of her kids, because for her, it was what brought her where she was. So on one hand, you have, his dad who was like, look, you need to be fierce. You need to know how to dominate this world. You need to, not let anything move you. You need to move it. His mom was like, look, you need to be educated. You need to know what you're talking about. If you don't have anything to say, then don't say anything at all. And then his grandma, who was rooted in love and in spirituality. So those were the three prongs that kind of, gave him that rounded view of the world. However, it didn't come without its bruises. Like his father was abusive. both to his mom and also, an avid user of alcohol. And so that meant that sometimes things were topsy-turvy in the house. For Will, being the eldest child in the home at that time, like it definitely put pressure, or he felt that it put pressure on him to be able to stand up for his mom whenever things were going awry between him and his dad. And from an early age, he felt like he could not do that. He spoke a lot about the fight, flight, freeze response, and how, one sibling was fight, the other was flight, he was freeze. And in the midst of that being his response, that's how he developed humor as like a trauma defense. So imagine that. And this is not something that's new. Like oftentimes the class clown, the person who is the funniest, much of that is rooted in pain, right? Because that's their way to kind of process it. That's most of those people, they're operating from that freeze response. And they're like, okay, you know what? Jazz hands, because if I can make you happy, then you won't hit me. If I can make you happy, then we'll have a happy home. If I can make you happy, I'll protect us for one more night. And so, that's really what started it. So when I read that as the first intro to Will, like Will, the person, honestly, he could not have had a better start. And throughout the book, the chapters are kind of strategically titled around, emotions that we'd feel. Growing up, you only know to feel two things: happy and anger. maybe sadness, but mostly happiness, or love and fear. Anger, fear. And there's much more to that. Like the emotional wheel is so fast. So we go through that emotion with him. And starting off the book, he started with fear. And, his parents came up with that because that was really the first time that he not only felt what fear was, but, understood what it could do to a family, understood what it could do to the psyche of a person and how they approach the world. His father taught him many important lessons, but two of which that, stood out to me was the concept of the brick wall. His father was an entrepreneur. He had his own ice business. And as kids, of course, you got to work at the store. Like they need free labor. What you talking? What summer holidays? And one year, both Will and his brother Harry were tasked with rebuilding the brick wall. Now imagine that. You got to build an entire wall as a kid. Like you have to do the digging, mix the cement, lay the brick, do that level thing, make sure it's straight, and do it again until you have that brick wall fully done. And it got to a point where he was at his breaking point. He could not go any further. And at that point, his father came out and he was like, look, you're looking at this thing all wrong. What you're looking at is the wall, right? And what you need to be looking at is the brick. Can you lay the brick right? Can you lay another brick right? You're focused on the brick. And if you're focusing on the brick, you'll eventually have a wall. Like, can you do that? And we've heard this many times throughout our lifetime. Like the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. Oprah says it all the time. Focus on the next right step. In many ways, but that story for him was his lesson in focusing on what he can control, focusing on what's in front of him, and using that as an opportunity to build confidence. Because if I lay this brick right, then I've done something right. I've validated to myself that I'm competent, and that helps to build confidence. The other lesson was on the negative side in terms of approach. His father had this saying that 99% is the same as 0. And of course, as an adult, that the journey is much more important than the destination. because you won't win all the time. But if along the way and in the process of getting to the destination, you have matured, you have, fostered relationships, you have, created assets, you have built a legacy, then the destination is not even that important. And I felt that, by instilling that kind of mindset from early on, about 99% being the same as 0, that breeded perfectionism, right? The need to be perfect, the need to do things over and over ad nauseum, and that can be painful. So, it took him a while as an adult to unpack that, but it's definitely something that was, that tape that replays in the back of his mind. And that was like, wow. So that's the parents, right? Then, of course, we have friends. Like, we know about Jazzy Jeff and their relationship. We know about JL. Like, Will went and spoke about aspects of Jazz's life that what nobody knew about, really. Like, Jazz just seemed like this cool dude, but he too has a story. He was diagnosed with cancer and beat it at the age of 10. And, because of that, his mom was very protective. Of course, like, if my child, God forbid, had cancer and survived, like, where are you going? Nowhere. You know what I mean? And so because of that level of protection, Jazz spent so much time in the basement. He didn't do anything else. But by the time they had met, after he has developed his craft and, Will had now become a beat boxer, he could do his things with the rhyming. He met somebody in Jazz who could match his work ethic. Certainly not out of fear in that way, or in the same way that Will, had developed that work ethic, but definitely in the product, the outcome. And that's how, he met him and he's like, yo, you're my person, man. Like, we're going to take over this world. And throughout the book, you could tell that Will is a person that, once he rocks with you, you're going to go with him. He's not leaving you behind. And sometimes that costed him. There's a point in the book where he was like, it's so painful when people I care about miss the opportunity to elevate, because they are unable to take a step. And he's going full speed ahead no matter what. And he wants to take you as his friend with him. But everybody can't go. Like, everybody has their own journey. And for some people, it can be too much. So he talked about the pain of losing friends along the way for one reason or another, and how that left an imprint on him. That was like, it was admirable and, it taught me stuff in the process, honestly, because I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if, I would be willing to convince persons of their own greatness in that way. And that made me sit with that, made me become self-aware of that. So, we still see Jazz around him now. So many years later, we see people like JL, his lawyer, Scotty, the Trini Rastaman, like, everybody had their story. Charlie Mack, the guy in Fresh Prince who was spinning him around, that was his actual bodyguard in real life. Like, that was his friend. So he brought all these people everywhere all the time, and that's awesome. That's commendable. I love that. I love that about him. That's a perfect segue into opportunities. So, of course, by the time he started working with Jazzy Jeff, they're doing all the things. They're producing music. They want to get a record deal. It's time for them to, go pro. Because based on the conversation with his mom, it was either, okay, he got 1 year. 1 year to make it happen, or you would have to go to college. And he decided that he's not going to college, so he has to make it in the year. And wouldn't you know, like a couple months before the year was up, he was bagging ice. He already accepted his fate. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to go tell my mom that she was right because I haven't made it yet. And in the middle of bagging ice, after bagging the ice, listening to, that hip hop countdown on the radio, finishing up, he's, bobbing to the stuff. He's like, damn, we ain't even make it this week. Their song debuted. Like sometimes they debut at 50 or 70 because it's top 100. I mean, you got to work your way down. But his song debuted at number one. And in that moment, he said, I was right about me. Now, even as I say that, like, yeah, because there's something to be said. There's something about that internal validation when you know that you know that you know, and you move with that intuition and you're correct. Like, nobody can talk to me after that, man. I said I was going to do this and I did this. What you got to say? Okay? You have nothing to say. I just proved myself right. I was right about me. Like, that was cool. And of course, that segued into, bigger opportunities because, like, it is what it is. If you are not prepared to handle what that comes with, and you're not in a position where you want to remain humble, then life's going to humble you. Life is the greatest teacher, and it will teach you things over and over until you get the picture. Yeah? And so for Will, it definitely resulted in a point where he had to lose everything. He wasn't paying his IRS. They took back everything that, they seized his stuff. He landed in prison. So many bad things happened all at once that was like, damn, I'm starting over. But this time, he was able to start over with his head in the right space. He recognized that, okay, above everything, your work ethic still needs to shine through. You were taught that for a reason. The application of it is not wrong, but, you need to kind of stick to it. And that discipline is what would be required of anybody who wants to be successful. He talked about how him and his friends, JL, Jazz, they came up with this formula of successful movies. So right about the time they were pivoting into music, he said, they're going to sit down. They got to sit down. They got to look at all the movies. JL read all the scripts of all the movies he could get his hands on, especially those that were successful. And over time, like a formula, it showed itself. Like, in order for a movie to be successful, it needs to have these elements in it. And they identified the elements. And if a script came about that didn't have these elements, we know it's a no because we know what we're looking for. And so it was so easy over time for them to pick the right scripts because it's like, okay, does it have all the elements? All right, awesome. Back to back to back. I think at this point, no one has beaten Will's record at this point. Like, he laid them out. He asked if you even want to get a calculator, okay? Because ultimately, he could put the crowd in, butts in seats. He was able to do that. You're starting off with like Bad Boy, Men in Black, all the things. I don't need to go over them. But amazing in terms of how he was able to kind of strategically tackle those opportunities and stick to the plan. Some movies like The Pursuit of Happiness and Ali, like those definitely left imprints because how he told the story, those are real stories. Those are people Ali was still alive when that story was being made. And even King Richard, like the way in which he portrayed those real life situations was like no other, right? Like no other. All right. Now here's the part that everybody wants to dive into. Like Will Smith and the girls. Now, one thing I found to be like refreshing was that from the jump, from chapter 1, Will declared himself, look, I'm the type of guy who's a one woman man. I just want to get married once. I don't even want to get divorced. I want to find somebody from the age of 10. You're my person, I'm your person, that's it. Everything I'll do would be for you, for a family. I want a bunch of kids. We just gonna hustle and then do what we need to do. And in a world where especially somebody who, looks as good as he does, is able to command a space, is intelligent, that's not usually the aim. The aim is usually to get as many as you can get. And, Will talk about his first love and his experience with that, how far he was willing to go to show devotion, and then the fact that she ultimately cheated on him and how devastated he was. And just even how he knew that something was awry based on, his intuition and his ability to read that something was off. And then, he would talk about like his love interests after that and how each one would have taught him something new about himself. Each one would have pushed him a little bit further. He, of course, talked about the first time he met Jada and the fact that, sometimes you can have the person who's for you and then in an instant you just miss them and go to somebody else. But because they're for you, you're going to go around. You can go around the world. You can't run. They're going to be, when it's your turn, it's your turn. And I love the way that he, depicted that story with just Cherie and what happened with them both. The fact that on Valentine's Day, unfortunately, Cherie served him some divorce papers, but in the back of his mind, he already knew who he needed to be with. Like, I love that. And the fact that, he was gonna do what he had to make sure that, look, this is gonna last. Love, there, you can think that you are whole, you are sound, you're self-aware, but two things will kind of bring up everything about you: your kid and your spouse, because your child will erupt things within you that you didn't even know was there. Let's start with that. And the same thing with your spouse, like especially if a happy home isn't something that you're coming from, especially if, a healthy parent-child dynamic is not something that you're accustomed to. You just have an idea of what it should be like in your head. Listen, it can be such a challenge going through that and then, still being committed. He said, don't be fooled, right? When you stand at the altar and you are saying your marriage vows, you're not saying them for the other person. You're saying them for yourself, right? That's the reason you have vows. If marriage was easy, you wouldn't need vows. Like, nobody has to tell you to go eat pizza. Nobody has to tell you to watch Netflix. You don't have to be coerced into doing that, okay? But you do gotta be reminded that it's your turn to do the dishes, that, you gotta go to work and actually be productive, because those are the hard stuff. So those vows were put in place for you to remind yourself that, look, I can do hard things. I am, committed to this relationship in sickness and in health, in for richer or for poorer. Like, that's a serious, serious commitment, not one to be taken for granted. And it means that you are committing to doing what you need to do to get the job done. That, from a guy, amazing. Amazing. And, ultimately, of course, everybody knows that their relationship isn't perfect. They have had their own bouts with infidelity or just redefining what marriage looks like for them. That ain't my business. I'm not about to judge anybody in that, because relationships are hard. Marriage is hard. And if you haven't been married, but you have been in a long-term relationship with someone, yeah. Some days it's just like, this ain't it. But then you remember what you're committed to doing, and you get up tomorrow and you start again. You do it again, and you stay committed to that vow. Towards the ends of the book, Will talks about, his family, his kids, and how, like, having them or being a father has brought out a different side of him. Like, in his mind, when you see something or when you've experienced something, you either say to yourself that, look, that's never going to be me, or I'm going to be like that, right? So in his mind, he never wanted to be his dad in terms of, like, the physical violence. But there are emotional aspects that he definitely carried through that he wasn't aware of. And one of them being, commitment, that work ethic, or how that work ethic demonstrates itself. So he talks about, like, Willow, and when her Whip My Hair song came out, she was signed by Jay-Z. She was now about to go on tour. And after she came off stage one night, she's like, look, I'm finished. I'm done. Like, this is not fun for me anymore. And at that point, he was like, what you mean? Like, we're about to do this again in another country, and again in Europe, and again in Australia. And how, he really had to come face to face with feelings. The fact that emotions are a real part of the human experience. And because he had spent so much time operating like a machine, like just applying the system, getting the job done, onto the next project, onto the next thing, always moving, constantly doing something, he hadn't gotten a time to sit down with his feelings. Now, I feel like for me, a real turning point in his life was the moment he decided to go on that airplane by himself, like no bodyguard, nobody to carry his luggage, nobody, no pre-planned activities. He's just getting on a plane. He's rediscovering himself. That silent retreat that he went on, like, he's just discovering himself. You can't skip lessons in life, right? And being comfortable with yourself, being comfortable being alone, spending time intentionally learning you, extremely, extremely important if you want to be able to level up, because that level of self-awareness is what allows you to, demonstrate empathy and compassion to other people. Like that was an emotional rock bottom for him. And it's through that, of course, that he tried ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is a psychedelic drug. It releases DMT in the brain. And for many people, they say it's a spiritual experience where you need like a shaman to be able to kind of walk you through. It's illegal in the US and some other parts of the world, but most people go to like South America, Peru, and like have this experience. Now, to date, or to the publishing of this book, Will had about 13 or 14 ayahuasca sessions, and each one he talked about like how he met the mother or Mother Earth or that strong feminine energy, and just how she introduced him to a different part of himself. And I was like, yeah, the jury's still out on ayahuasca, but I appreciated the fact that he said I wouldn't be honest if I told my story and left that out, because that was an important part of my journey, to get to know myself in a bid to be able to comfortably set boundaries, in a bid to understand that other people have feelings too, in a bid to kind of acknowledge and appreciate the partnerships that I have around me. And that takes bravery. Like, it's a point of surrender when you're just like, you know what, all I really want is peace. All I really want is to be able to approve of myself and really and truly believe it when I say I am enough. I am good enough. I am loved. I am warmth. I am all things good out there in the world. Ultimately, his definition of love is more on the unconditional side, right? It's many times we love people with silent conditions, right? We don't even want to acknowledge it. Like, even if we do things for them, we do it so that they can turn around and praise us. Let's be real. And so to be in a position where, he can come to terms with that and be okay with sharing that, like, that means a ton. And everybody can do those things. Like, we can all connect with ourselves in a different way. Be intentional about spending 10 or 15 minutes here and there meditating, like spending some time alone, grounding yourself, connecting yourself, like asking yourself those hard questions and sitting and waiting for a response. We all have experiences with people that we love, be it family or friends or losing loved ones. Like, Will talked about the death of his dad and how, in his silent retreat, he read a book that said that people who are transitioning, they oftentimes need your permission. And like so many, when he said that made sense. Like, they need to know that, look, I'm okay. If you die, I'm going to be okay. You did a good job. You did well. And although he had such a traumatic experience growing up with his dad, and the moments of joy were just as jarring as the moments of pain, he was able to put aside that towards the end of his father's life and ensure that the transition was as graceful as it could be. And that's like one of my core values, like exit gracefully. And to be able to put aside your personal feelings or the desire to seek revenge blew my mind. Like, we all experience, life is happening to everybody out there. They have a story that's just as impressive as what's in this book, right? And so the main takeaway is, okay, how can I learn from lessons that you have already gone through so that I can either, approach them differently when I meet them the next time around, or I can impart that knowledge on somebody else. And I feel like, you know, as an entire body of work, start to end, this book was able to do that. It was less about like celebrity status and what that meant, and sure, that's involved, that's a part of his journey, but it was more about, you know, the true Will Smith, the person who is seeking peace, and in a bid to get there, um, you know, is ready to be honest with themselves. And that is no easy feat. I mean, I hope I did some justice to this book. I hope I did. Like, we all know my pet peeves, this flappy thing, but you know what? It will get a pass this time. It will get a pass this time because it was really and truly a great body of art. If you know, are still thinking about getting it, get it. If you got it and you read it and you loved it, share it with somebody so that, you know, even if you guys never talk about it, they would have experienced something for it themselves, something new, something fresh, and just, you know, introspect for a little bit. All right. Thank you. If you stuck around to this point in the video, like, you are awesome. I really appreciate you. I'm launching this video as a part of my version of Vlogmas, where I'll be trying to put out a ton of content this month. And so, you know what? I'm looking forward to seeing more of you, or for you seeing more of me, for us hanging out more together. It's gonna be awesome. Until the next video, I'm Shanique, and you know, we just like go under the thing. All right, guys. Bye.